The workshop smelled of dry resin and stale air. A single lamp cast long, flickering shadows against the stone walls. The priest stood over the table, his hands steady, his focus absolute. He held a long bronze hook. With a practiced motion, he inserted the metal into the nostril, feeling for the thin bone that guarded the path to the mind. He pushed, twisted, and pulled. The motion was rhythmic, mechanical, and silent. Inside the skull, the tissue liquefied, draining away into a waiting basin. This was the first step of a 70-day mission. The Egyptians knew the truth. If the flesh rots, the soul wanders forever in darkness. To secure eternity, they had to strip the human form of everything that invited decay. The priest did not hesitate. He moved with the weight of tradition behind every strike. Each movement was a calculated strike against time itself, a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between the living world and the afterlife. The ritual was not an act of violence, but a sacred necessity. He pulled the hook free, cleaned the bronze, and prepared for the next stage of the long, silent work that would define a soul's destiny. The priest wiped his hands and turned to the abdomen. He picked up an obsidian blade, its edge sharper than any bronze. He made a single, precise incision, opening the cavity. One by one, he reached inside. He extracted the lungs, then the liver, then the stomach, and the intestines. Each organ was cleaned with wine, treated with care, and lowered into its respective stone canopic jar. The lids of these vessels were carved into the heads of protective gods, watching over the remains. The workshop remained deathly silent. The priest worked with a surgeon's precision, his movements flowing from one task to the next without pause. Yet, when his hand reached the center of the chest, he stopped. He did not touch the heart. He left it where it beat in life, anchored deep within the rib cage. This was the silent witness. It would remain to be weighed against the feather of truth in the final judgment. Everything else was removed to stop the rot, but the heart was the anchor of the soul. He stepped back, letting the light fall on the hollowed form. The work of extraction was complete, leaving the body ready for the long drying to come. The priest signaled to his assistants. They brought forward heavy bags of natron, a natural salt harvested from the lake beds. They began to pour. Slowly, the hollow vessel was buried. The white grains filled the thoracic cavity and banked against the limbs until the remains were completely hidden from view. This was the most vulnerable phase of the ritual. For 40 days, the salt began its silent, relentless work. It drew every drop of moisture from the skin and muscle. In the dim silence of the temple, the body shriveled. Flesh tightened against bone. The structure held, but the transformation was total. Every day, the priests monitored the salt, replacing it as it became saturated, ensuring the drying was absolute. If the moisture remained, the decay would return. If the salt succeeded, the form would endure for ages. Finally, the 40 days passed. The priests returned to the table. They began to brush away the salt, revealing a dark, rigid shell. The skin had hardened into a deep, leathery texture. The vessel was no longer prone to rot. It was dry, stable, and ready to be wrapped for eternity. The transformation was complete. The priests began the final binding. They unfurled hundreds of meters of fine linen, moving in a practiced, rhythmic dance around the table. With every turn, they pulled the fabric taut, pressing the material against the dried limbs until the form was completely encased. This was not merely covering, it was a structural reinforcement. Between every layer, the priest stopped to tuck small, carved amulets, beetles of stone and gold into the folds of the shroud. These were the hidden guardians, placed to protect the spirit against the dangers of the underworld. The pace accelerated. Layer upon layer of cloth rose, turning the dark, leathery shell into a pristine, white monument. Then, the lead priest stepped forward with the final piece. He held a mask of solid, polished gold. It mirrored the face of the king in eternal, unyielding shine. He pressed the metal down, securing it over the wrapped head. The transition was instantaneous. The hollow, shriveled vessel vanished, replaced by a radiant, golden icon. The workshop filled with the soft glint of the metal, reflecting the lamplight. The transformation from a decaying body to a divine, immortal image was finally achieved. The priests guided the sarcophagus into the heart of the tomb. They arranged the final provisions: jars of grain, oil, and intricate wooden models of servants, each intended to serve the king in his long journey. The work finished, the priests retreated into the light. One by one, they stepped back as the heavy stone door slid into place. It struck the threshold with a dull, final thud, locking out the living world and sealing the chamber in absolute darkness. There, the king waited in his nested shells. Thousands of years later, we pull back those stone lids. We see the linen still holding its shape. We see the artifacts left for a ruler who never returned. Time has eroded the kingdoms and silenced the voices of those who performed these rites. Yet the physical evidence remains. Their rituals have outlasted their empires, standing as a testament to the human struggle against mortality. Immortality remained a dream that no spirit could truly grasp, but they succeeded in their final ambition. They carved their legacy into stone, ensuring that even as the flesh faded, their name and their story would persist to be read by the future. It is a quiet, enduring defiance of the end.